Chika, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
If you wouldn't mind just giving us just a sort of a brief overview of why insurance, how you got into the insurance industry. Were you aware of it sort of when you first started in your career?
Yes, of course. Unfortunately, it's not the answer you might be looking for. So it wasn't a considered choice. I have to be perfectly honest, but I think that's probably true for a lot of people who work in insurance. I have said in the past it was accidental, but I think it's more a case of, it was what it was. I grew up not really knowing what I wanted to be in life. If I go back far enough, I dabbled with the idea of being a journalist, being a lawyer, being something in medicine. And then the subjects you do at school tend to whittle away the potential career choices that you make. So I just did the subjects that I enjoyed the most. So from an A-level point of view, that ended up being maths, French and history. So I ditched the sciences. I didn't go all in for maths and further maths, and I didn't go all in for the creatives. So when it came to doing a university course, I realised I was a bit scuppered then because I didn't really know what that would lead me to. I had a careers questionnaire, which I did, which asked random and many questions. And I don't know why I remember it so much, but I do. And the end result of this was a list of potential career choices. And I do remember vividly that a firefighter was in there, so goodness only knows what I'd answered, but also an actuary. Probably like most 18-year-olds, I didn't know what an actuary was. So I looked it up. I wouldn't say I was completely drawn to it, but what I did see that there was a related degree course which you could do, which was quite broad based. So it was a combination of stats and maths and economics. And crucially, they allowed me to come on with the kind of mixed bag of A-levels that I had. So I chose that because it seemed broad enough and varied enough. And it also made it very clear that you didn't have to be an actuary at the end of it. So it just seemed like a nice degree to do. That said, having done the degree, I got a bunch of exemptions from this thing called an actuarial profession, and it seemed a waste not to then follow through on that. So I then applied, obviously, to a bunch of insurance companies and consultants. I was pretty convinced that I didn't want to work for an insurance company. But Aviva, which was ultimately the place I ended up with, I was really impressed with their recruitment process. Now, this sounds really bizarre, but it was quite tough. It was quite rigorous. They took me away for to this graduate centre, and it was really hard. And I got a job at the end of it. So I felt actually quite grateful. I don't know, that sounds a bit weird, a bit pleased that I achieved this hurdle. And it pushed them up in my estimation as a result.
Interesting.
So contrary to any kind of logic as to who you want to, because of that process, I selected them. So I kind of fell into it. And actually I stayed there forever.
And what had been your kind of preconceptions of the insurance market that made you think initially, oh, not for me?
Yeah, so preconceptions is probably a bit strong. So it just wouldn't have even registered on my,
radar.
On my radar at all.
Yeah.
So it was just, the steps that led me there were, just the way things played out. So, however, it was everything that I might have thought it would be, if I'm honest. It was all of the things, all of the, all of the stereotypes, shall we say, that you might have had then, and maybe some people still have now. They were strong and true.
Yeah. Any surprises?
Surprises. I think and this is on, with the benefit of hindsight. The surprises were the fact that it was good to me. It was good for me, and it was good to me. So it gave me a stability, a security, a structure that I appreciated. That's not for everybody, but that was for me, and that is reflective of my circumstances, my background, that I placed a high value on all of those. And it's not really that surprising if you think about the different career paths and professions that exist, that would be the case. But because I went into that industry not really knowing what I was letting myself in for, it became, over the fullness of time, clear to me that those were things that I was benefiting from and valued.
And did you know from a young age, or when you first started your career, that you wanted, or certainly had aspirations to be in a leadership position, whatever that may have looked like? Was that on your radar when you started work, or did that come later?
So I should say that I have almost certainly continued to have zero ambition in a career path way. I have never been motivated by ambition. So absolutely, in the sense that I think you mean, I would never had a notion of achieving whatever that corporate leadership would look like. And that stems from just not recognizing that that is something that I would fall into, or that I would adopt, or that is aligned with me in any way. So my motivations have been pretty much like they were at school, really. Just keep your head down, do a good job, be a good girl, do the right thing. I get motivated by being the best that I can. I have a strong ethic, which I inherit from my father, I would say. And those are things that govern me probably even today, really. So it's all about, how can I help? How can I do that better? I'm probably my biggest taskmaster. What can I do? How can I do it? Why didn't I get that right? How could I do that better? How can I help others around me? Those are my motivations for sure.
And on a similar sort of vein, those are your motivations in terms of characteristics and personality traits. How do they kind of show up in your leadership style?
I think it's easier if you're not ambition led. You maybe see things differently. So you are less concerned sometimes with some of the noise that can be attached to whatever the problem or the situation that you're dealing with, and that's very, very true when you're dealing with people, but also just in the substance of the work that you're dealing with. So you're just focused on what's presented to you rather than what sits around it. There is a flip side to that, because sometimes you absolutely need to be more mindful of that. And I did learn that quite significantly when I did an MBA a couple of years ago, that the idea that being apolitical, small p, is actually not a good thing. And it's actually quite dumb, actually, to be completely blind of all of that stuff. So I do recognise that there is a bit of a balance. But more specifically to your point, I have learned a lot about myself over the years. I'm very much of the school of thought that self-awareness is probably the single best thing you can have about yourself, because to know yourself is to learn about yourself and to develop and be better. So I now know that I am hugely introverted, sometimes very awkward with that. So it's important to know that, so then you can manage around it. And I am quiet, and I don't mean from a volume point of view or just sit in a corner. I am quiet about the way I approach things. So it means I probably have a slightly different approach about certain things, to problems, to others in the office. Over the years, I've learned to be comfortable with that. I'm quite reflectful. I tend not to be forceful. I don't like to rock the boat, but I am very, very comfortable with challenge. very comfortable with challenge, but I just go about it in my way. So I always stay true to myself, and I do feel that you can achieve certain outcomes in not necessarily the obvious ways.
And I think what we're seeing in leadership is the role of the leader is evolving, and that, you know, there have been stereotypes in the past of what a leader sounds like or looks like or behaves. And I think there is a spectrum of leadership and different types of leaders. And for those of our listeners who perhaps maybe really what you have just said really resonates with them, that, you know, perhaps more introverted, and how have you helped overcome, or not overcome that, but learning about yourself and using that in a way, getting practical tips of how knowing yourself has helped you?
It has been really valuable, but that requires quite a big investment to do that. So it's not a trivial exercise to say know yourself, because we all fundamentally know ourselves, but how deep and how far and how much time are you prepared to invest in that? So that is really scrutinizing what you do, how you do it, and the impact you're having on others. So it's being really thoughtful, but also seeing things. So when you're in a room, when you're talking to someone, really looking for how they are responding to you. And I can give you a really good example of that. So I know through feedback and also through what I see with my own eyes that people will have a very different experience of Chika depending on how I pitch up at a meeting or a particular day. And I've seen that written down in feedback. And the feedback I have got from two different people, you wouldn't realise that they were talking about the same person. But I properly understood why they would have that different reaction. I would have pitched up completely differently. I'm told that if I'm not smiling, I have a certain intensity about me, which, and again, it's a two-way thing. So for some people, that they would shrug their shoulders and it wouldn't matter. But for other people, they would feel quite differently in the presence of me if I'm in that vein. So I have to know when to dial things up or dial things down, or which version of me is in the room at a given point in time. That same feedback, someone else was, describing, a completely different person. It was quite remarkable, and it's quite an eye-opener, and it gives you something to be completely aware of as to which version of yourself you're going to be. And it's okay to be either or both of those things, or many of those things, provided you are aware and provided you moderate it to the extent that it needs to be, depending on who's on the other side of that.
What was it about you and the work that you were doing at the time that you got those promotions, or got you into the position to be able to say yes to some of those opportunities? What were you doing? Was it just the head down working hard that was recognised, or was there an element of you having to go out and grasp that?
So if I reflect on my time at Aviva, there were probably two phases. And the first phase, which was not insignificant, it's quite long, was absolutely just head down. So if you imagine, I joined as a graduate, as an actuarial trainee, and you literally are having to balance work and studying. And early on, the focus is very much studying, passing exams. And so it is a head down situation. You work hard, you're learning in the workplace as well. And actually the promotions, such as they are automatic. You pass an exam and you go up a level. You qualify, then you're automatically going up a level. So there wasn't anything I had to do other than, do what I've always done, which is, work hard and study hard and, pass a few exams, which, they weren't easy, but that's kind of what you have to do. And if you bring that approach into the workplace, it's a similar kind of outcome, I suppose. So that took me so far. And then there was probably a period when I started to look up and out a little more and realised that this wasn't enough. for me, and that's probably a combination of maturing in a broader sense, seeing the wider world for what it was, reflecting more deeply on your environment that you are working in, and the extent to which you want to continue in that vein, or to use the position that is accruing to you in a more positive way. And all of those things, I think, over a period started to compound and present themselves to me, and led me to ask some severe questions of myself. And I responded. So it
Like
led
what?
me to,
Like what type of question?
are you happy to exist day to day and not make a change for yourself or others?
Yeah.
Are you happy with some of the challenges that I think I hadn't really leaned into? The experience of working at that time, they were, things that I just glossed over and just accepted, and I increasingly wasn't. And some of that became clearer to me as I engaged more externally as well. So with speaking to younger people, seeing things through the eyes of others, did a better job than my own eyes, I suppose, than in seeing what was happening. So increasingly, there was more than just the day to day that became important to me.
And what was that sort of seeing through the eyes of others? Was that sort of things in terms of your progression within your career, or what sort of things did that stepping into the shoes of others?
So not initially. So there were, after that initial kind of head down phase, there were a couple of, and I promised you it's true, accidental promotions. So I went on maternity leave twice, and in both cases when I came back, I think we'd literally been taken over by another company, and my boss had left, and I found myself promoted into a new role, and that happened twice, to the extent that my boss at the time said, "Please don't go on leave of maternity, because I'm not sure I'll have a job when I get back." So a couple of those things, and so a degree of seniority came about, but then I also got quite involved in. I suppose, started to get involved in some diversity type activity. Initially, it was the women's networks, because that's what was around. So I kind of fell into that. I think I asked a question, and they then turned that on me. And before I knew it, I was leading that women's network. But then again, that wasn't enough, because that was one element of diversity, but that wasn't the entirety of diversity, and certainly not everything that I was interested in. So through that, I got involved with young people, mentoring, speaking at external events, and as I said, seeing more through their eyes. And probably the most impactful of those events that I remember at that sort of stage was when a young lady came up to me and said she was a Black lady. It was a Black History Month event at Essex University, so quite a few years ago. I was on a panel event and just talking to them about the world of being an actuary in insurance. And it was quite astonishing to me that in the years that I had been in the workplace, that it felt like nothing had changed. She came up to me and said she had withdrawn her application to the Institute of Actuaries because she didn't feel it was for someone like her. I had actually semi-applied to go to Oxford, but had withdrawn my application because I didn't think that I would fit in that environment. So it's not not exactly the same, but the same sort of mentality, sense of inferiority existing. And I was really stunned by that, and that kind of led me to think, right, Chika, you have to do a lot more. You have to make the industry, yourself, even though that's quite painful, the profession more accessible, more visible, and encourage as many people as you can to be more, do more, have more aspirations than probably I had for myself.
Yeah, I guess it's a burden that, some people in their careers don't necessarily think about, because there are lots of other people that look like them. But in this, in this case, you've used it very much for the good. And there's lots to be said, actually, I think, for reverse mentoring. Some companies do it where, some of the C-suite have a graduate as a reverse mentor, and it can be eye-opening, actually.
Absolutely,
especially with, I think, the younger generation looking at life and differently, and it's quite refreshing in some areas.
Yeah, I agree.
How important were mentors, role models, bosses, even the company culture in your sort of progression or ascendance to kind of more senior positions? Did that play a part at all, or not really?
No, in a word, but that doesn't mean that I don't now fully appreciate how they could have helped. So historically, that there was an absence of that. So that's not something that I benefited from, but I have to put my hands up here. It's probably not something that I was confident enough to reach out for, if I'm perfectly honest. In more recent years, though, I feel that I really have benefited from it, and I fully buy into the significance of it, the importance of it, and really wish actually that I had more of that earlier on in my life. So when I do speak to other people, particularly young people, I do bang on a lot about the need, not just for one-on-one mentorship, but the power of communities, connections. I don't use the word networking because it's something I hate with a vengeance, but just meaningful connections. And there's this thing, if you don't ask, you don't get. And it's so true. It really is true.
And were there any sort of experiences or values from your sort of childhood that kind of have really shaped the person and leader that you are today?
Yeah, and the reason why I can answer this quite easily is because of that period of self-reflection and self-awareness that I've had in recent years. So I wouldn't have been aware of this at the time or live in the moment or for many, many years. But I know myself to be very, very resilient. I would say hyper resilient to the point of being unhealthy. I think resilience is a great thing, or perceived to be a great thing, even from a regulatory point of view. We talk about operational resilience, and it's a good thing. But on a personal level, on an individual level, when I think about myself, it can flip into being not always so good, because what it actually means is that you tolerate more than you should.
Yeah.
And I think that is definitely true for me. And the essence of that does stem, I'm afraid, to some dark days growing up outside of London as the kind of single Black family in a community, and having had to put up with a bunch of stuff that, frankly, no child should have when we were in a period of society when explicit, abusive racism was a thing. There's no getting away from it. So those are some of the things that I would have experienced. And so anything that was less than that was great and was fine. So the kind of implicit stuff or the subtle stuff or all of that stuff was just so much more tolerable than anything that I would have put up with in the past, and therefore fine. And anything in the workplace, any kind of dramas, my motto at the moment is kind of, let's take the drama out of this, whatever it is. There's always a people drama, isn't there? And I guess I can tolerate it. It's fine. I never lose sleep over work, never. I'm quite calm, quite collected, and I can deal with stuff because it doesn't, in the scheme of things, feel really that bad.
Yeah.
Any tips for people of working out what's the difference between actually resilience, good, positive resilience versus tolerance?
I think trusted conversations. So I wouldn't say, just kind of random conversations or, ad nauseum. Find the person, the group, the network, the connections that are deep, meaningful, and you can have those kind of save conversations with. Because you will find that when you start to articulate something, even as you are saying it out loud, you will start to realize that actually this probably is not acceptable, and getting someone else's reaction. And as I said, it has to be someone that, you can trust to validate what you've experienced or what you've seen or what you're feeling. Could be anything. It doesn't have to be significant or hugely significant. I think that can be really valuable, and that's probably something I did not do. Well, I know that is something that I did not do. I was going to say enough of, but I did not do. And part of that is the introversion. So I wasn't minded to share. I was going to say overshare, but to share that sort of thing. But there is a place for it. Absolutely.
And tell us a bit more about how your move to Munich Re, because that was your first C-suite role. What were some of the challenges there? Why did you take that role? Because that was a step up for you at the time.
Yeah, so it was probably staged, by which I mean in phases. So it was a long process, and it wasn't. It wasn't a given that would actually happen. So having said that I was at Aviva for many, many years, it took me a period doing an MBA, an executive MBA, a short sabbatical, and probably 2 or 3 years to get my head around leaving Aviva. So that for me was the key decision point, that it was finally time to move on.
When did you know that, right, to get more from my career, I'm going to have to leave a business that has served me very, very well?
Yes. Well, again, you're assuming that I did it for career reasons. And
fair point.
That's not the case. So I had for a long time been feeling uncomfortable with the idea that I was effectively institutionalized. I mitigated that for a while by looking outside of the organisation. So in the earlier days, I did things like a school governor. I got involved through the DEI in various groups outside of the organisation. More latterly, non-exec type work as well. And that satisfied me. So it made me feel... and indeed, I was exposed to another way of viewing things, other organisations, other people. I got a lot of value out of that. And I think it is important, because I was uncomfortable with the idea that I was seeing things in a very singular and way that you wouldn't realise it, but you are. You're very narrow in your view if you only see it through the eyes of one organisation. And then increasingly, that still wasn't enough. And, it's fair to say that there was a lot of change in the organisation. Whilst I'm comfortable with change, that change was prolonged and ongoing and not always satisfactory. That's inevitable. If you're there long enough, eventually that change will catch up with you. And then I think, to be perfectly honest, the MBA, which I did reluctantly, very reluctantly. Really reluctantly. It's not what I wanted. I was very unwilling. However, having resigned myself mentally that I was going to do this, I decided that I was going to get certain things out of it. And those certain things were to force myself to do some of that personal reflection, self-investment. I can assure you I wasn't doing it for the accounting modules. So the ones I got more excited about were kind of the behavioural science. When we had to do the self-awareness elements, I put way more time in than probably everybody put together on all of those things. And it was just what I needed. And it gave me the space to actually properly get my head around the idea that, okay, we're going to do this. I am actually going to leave this organisation that I've been with all these years, which sounds funny, but that's what it took, and that's what I needed. So I had a little bit of sabbatical in between. And at the end of that, I went in, and I never went back after that.
Are you glad you did it?
Absolutely, I am. But I would say this, and Guy, I think you know this, that having made that decision and taken time off once I'd left, I wrote down, I had a list of what I thought I wanted to do and not wanted to do. And on the not to do was not to work in the insurance industry and not to be a CRO. So go figure, yeah.
What are some of the lessons learned, the failures that you've learned from, you're still learning from, that maybe could be sort of key takeaways for our listeners and kind of younger generations, younger people coming into the market?
There's an incident that comes to mind, which kind of links a lot of what I think about in the work context. So I live in the world of risk. I naturally align it with some of the issues that come out from DEI. I think they're very connected in terms of some of the issues that we talk about. And I do recall a conversation with an individual who challenged me on why we need all this DEI, which it sounds quite interesting given where we are right now, but this was a few years ago. And I crumbled. I got very emotional. I had no argument. I had no comeback. And I came up with all the killer arguments that night when I was in bed. But at the time, I had nothing to offer. This is this thing that I was doing all the time. And it was a very powerful reminder of the danger of being in the room with people who all share your views, all singing off the same hymn sheet, and everyone violently agreeing with everybody else. And I will never, ever do that and put myself in that situation again. So when it comes to anything, really, whether it's my team, the wider team, my direct reports around the ExCo, I want to be faced with challenge. I will give it, but I also want to receive it. I'm not interested with everyone agreeing with me. I want to understand what the counter arguments are, because you become stronger that way.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't respond to it, then that's fine, because that means that there is a legitimate counter argument to what you're proposing. Why would I not want to know that?
Mm-hmm.
And I certainly don't want to quell that.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a very, very important lesson to me. And I'm always, always keen not to be around a room of people who just agree.
No, I think that's a really good example.
And how have you, sorry, just going back to the, I don't want to be a CRO and I don't want to be in the insurance industry, and you're now a CRO of a well-known insurance company. How have you found it?
Especially being, someone who's not, happy to, well, you give opinions, but you are naturally more introverted. How do you find getting your point across? Because I'm sure there's lots of people, again, aspiring to that position or on a board at the moment and maybe struggle with that, getting their voice heard.
Yeah, so again, this probably goes back to what I think is a recurring theme for me about knowing thyself. And I know that I have sometimes, often, a different take on things. So I have over a period become comfortable in articulating that, and it generates genuine questions, which is exactly in my role and in that kind of environment what is required. But I also have the benefit of, prior to the CRO role, being around a board table, albeit as an ed. So I think that's valuable experience.
Yep.
And I think bringing those things together with an organisation, a board that came to me. So I suppose it goes back to the Aviva and the recruitment process. I valued a process where it wasn't a shoe-in. There was a very kind of strong interaction with the CEO, with others, and a follow-up. So it wasn't just the first interview, I think not even the second or third. And I was grateful for that, because that validated me in some ways, that even after those rounds and considering other people, they still considered me to be the right person. And also when I looked, and I did very anally, at the detail of what they were asking for, I saw in the ask elements of what I felt I could give. So that gives you a degree of confidence in going into that role. I didn't hold back. I presented as me. I didn't present as something else. And if that's what they want, and warts and all, that's what they've got. So I do feel that I have that understanding with my CEO. He knows I'm an introvert. He knows that I might bring something different around the table. And that's what he wants.
That's a really good point.
How, in your view, are you going to have to adapt to the challenges of the next 5 years? What new skills or things do leaders need to upskill or learn that they don't already know now that are going to be, much more important as the market evolves, adapts over the next few years or so?
I mean, it's a good question, and it's a big question, I would say. The more progressive leaders will be ones that are able to make those sorts of decisions, see the world through a risk lens. And that's risk in its really broadest sense. Now, a good example I can give of that is that with the narrative right now everywhere, whether you're talking about, politics or, the commercial elements in all our industries, not just insurance, it's growth. It's the word, it's the buzzword, it's what everyone, every entity, every organisation is craving for, what we're trying to achieve. Now, there would be one way of seeking for that and planning for it. But if you're really thoughtful about it and really think about what might help you unlock that, I think you would go about it differently. I think you would apply some risk-based thinking. I think you might also think from a DEI lens, although you wouldn't have to be explicit on that point. You wouldn't have to frame it in that way. And a good example of that is understanding about talent and talent pools. So none of us are going to be able to achieve those growth ambitions, despite what we've written in our plans, without having enough of the right people, and probably enough of the right people who think slightly differently to all of the other organisations who are striving to do exactly the same thing. So it's a conversation I literally had this morning with my CEO about how are we going to do this differently? What is going to be the differentiator? And how do you appreciate that? So how do the leaders within our business take that on board? And it's not easy. So it requires having a more, more innovative, maybe a more creative, maybe a more thoughtful way of thinking about the problems that have existed for time, but recognizing the externalities that are changing, the landscape that has changed in a way that we all need to keep up with. So we know, or we think we know, that talent pool, whether we like it or not, is going to be more diverse than it has ever been. The ONS data tells us that within the next 5 to 6 years, most of that population growth is going to come from migrants. Now, that's something that a progressive organisation needs to understand and deal with. So, if you look around your organisation, are you set up to deal with that? Properly set up to deal with that and to leverage that? Because you're going to have to anyway, but there will be other organisations who are already achieving in that regard, and they will cream off that better talent before we can.
Do you think, with just looking at your sort of background in terms of academics, you did a mixture of science subject with the liberal arts in terms of languages and history.
History and French, yeah.
And then on the MBA side, you've been more interested or more focused on the qualitative side of the course as opposed to the accountancy. Do you think that's helped you have a more balanced way of thinking?
I think it's a really interesting point, and almost certainly that has been helpful to me and a differentiator and an explanation almost of how, why, you know, I am what I am, and I've approached things the way that I approach. I wouldn't say that that's the answer for everyone, because I think it's perfectly acceptable, probably even necessary, to have those individuals that are deep into their subject and who will be comfortable being deep in that subject. So that's fine. However, what I would say is, and I have said this to people, particularly young people, that if you are interested in being future fit or in developing yourself in a particular way and progressing, I think there is a loss of merit in having a skill set rather than just a skill.
Yeah.
It's really, really hard being in the top 10% of anything. We're just not going to do that. You know, we're never going to be that outstanding in anything. However, if you have if you have 2, 3, 4, maybe even 5 things that you are really outstanding at, you will almost, by definition, for that combination of skills, be in the top 10%. And they could be really obscure things. So, you know, I don't know, a Spanish-speaking UK qualified actuary who, you know, does French cuisine, whatever they might be, you don't know when those skills or that combination of skills or what development angle that they offer you will be useful and set you apart from other people. So I often say to people, don't just look up, but look around. It's okay to look laterally. It's okay to look outside of your organisation. Whether you're a school governor, which is a very, very important role, which people underestimate, I think, whether you're a parent, a carer, all of those things give you a different dimension to just the day job. But you need to be mindful of that. You need to be aware of it. And you need to draw on those skills that you almost certainly are building, but just not even aware that you are.
And I think working for someone and a company that's going to encourage that as well, because, you know, and this sort of brings that sort of answers very nicely. You know, what advice would you give someone just beginning their journey who does have aspirations to run a company one day? Or
but also, you know, it may not be the environment to develop all of those, and that's also fine. So you take that somewhere else, you seek it, you get it from somewhere else. But I guess do it mindfully. What I say to people in my team is, be considered at the start of the year what you are seeking to develop within yourself over the course of the year, and at the end of the year, update your CV, because if you're not able to in any way, then you have to ask yourself what's happened to the year.
That's a good practical tip.
Ready to finish on a song?
Absolutely. So we ask our guests what's their go-to song for if you're needing a motivational boost, or you have a day of board meetings ahead and you just need to give yourself that extra oomph before them. What's the go-to song?
Yes. So I probably have to kind of test the premise of the scenario.
Do.
Going
I
into
thought you were about to do a performance.
No. Going into a boardroom, I'm not. You won't surprise you to be the kind of person that needs to be powered up and oomph
chest thumping.
Yes, oomph is not a word that you know. My preparation would usually just to read the board papers to the nth degree. However, the spirit of what you're saying is, you know, what would inspire me and why. And there are probably 2 pieces of music that I go to routinely if I am having, you know, a difficult day, or if there's been a difficult thing to get through. So one is Mary J. Blige, and it's called No More Drama, because I just feel life is full of drama, and I just want that drama just to leave sometimes. So when I play that, I just think, yes, that's what I'm aiming for. No more drama. But, you know, today's drama is tomorrow's old news. I have learnt that. So I do like that a lot. And it's also vocally outstanding.
Yeah.
And then the other one is, I'm not sure how well known this group is. So it's an African fusion group of musicians called Kokoroko. They're it's a collective, so they're a group of young musicians, but they're very heavily influenced by a sound that I grew up with. So it's very reminiscent of my own West African origins. And there's a particular song which is called Abusi Junction.
Okay.
Very few lyrics, however, it's evocative for me. It reminds me of my father, that work ethic that I'm talking about. It's very grounding for me and very uplifting. And as the musicality of it is quite extraordinary. And also the idea that music that I would have heard within the confines of my kind of family home, outside of London, completely remote from, culturally from everything, is now so widespread in our kind of popular culture. I find that really pleasing and a positive. So it does tell me of some progress. in a certain way, but it's also a very, very beautiful piece of music.
Brilliant. Well, thank you.
Yeah,
Chika.
thank you very much for your time. That was
Thank you.
great.
Really good. Thank you.